After a night in Bergen, I was leaving to head east into the mountains of South Norway. I travelled this way many years earlier interrailing, but this was a solo trip. The train was comfortable and I was surprised to see people getting on the train carrying ski bags. Almost immediately the train went into a long tunnel, and when we exited we got glimpses of the fjords before going into the next tunnel. And this was how it would continue. Long tunnels and a glimpse of a beautiful fjord before the next tunnel. When the train reached Stavanger, I could see snow on the mountain tops, and as we went further into the mountains, more and more snow. At one stop we could see people walking along a path, carrying skis over their shoulders. I wondered how high the train was going to go. Then through another tunnel, this time exiting with a frozen snow lake, below the level of the train. Maybe I hadn't brought the right gear for this trip. But when I got to Myrdal, where I was changing trains, the station was clear, and I waited for my next train, the 1 hour journey back to sea level at Flåm. The train pulled in and the locomotive looked pretty serious. There were around 6 coaches, and I jumped on to get a good seat for the journey. The first 10 minutes of the trip was underwhelming, mainly in the tunnel. I got used to the people I was sharing my carriage with, probably all tourists like myself. The Flåm Railway was promised to be pretty spectacular. Then we came out of the tunnel and we could see the valley bottom far below. This was a big descent in such a short distance. After the next tunnel we saw a waterfall on the right of the train. The train stopped for a few minutes and the keener tourists leapt off to take photos. I stayed on the train to keep my seat. Sometimes the views were on my side of the carriage and sometimes on the other. Waterfalls tumbling thousands of feet down the mountainside. The journey was getting better. After dropping 1,000 or so feet, the train came to a valley, still descending. Now the views were less broken by tunnels, and we could see the magnificent surroundings the Flåm Railway is built into. The train's 5 set of brakes were still screeching as we dropped. 5 sets in case any of them failed. We started to see tiny settlements, probably only accessible by train. We hung out the windows, being wowed by the views. This was like the best of interrailing over again. As we dropped, we saw the Flam River along the bottom of the valley. Dark green in the sunshine, we were having great weather for the trip. Finally we pulled into Flåm station, with another train ready for the upward journey back up the single track. The Flåm Railway had been better than I remembered. The centre of Flåm village though was very crowded. People waiting for tourist boats and to get back on the railway for the return trip up to Myrdal. It was also very commercialised with many stalls, a pizza train, a Norwegian style bar and even a mall for the Americans. I walked away from the centre to escape the tourists, picking up some lunch at a small store and headed down to the Flåm River. The river flows down into Aurlandsfjord and is a beautiful green colour. I found a spot to eat lunch by a river bridge and took in my surroundings in the valley. Away from the tourists, the village gets much more pleasant, with waterfalls cascading down the steep valley sides. Flåm is at the southern tip of Aurlandsfjord, and this joins into Norway's largest fjord, Fjord. Set back from the fjord there is a small hill which overlooks the village. A series of paths lets you climb up it to get better views of the fjord. As you get higher, the commercial centre of the village gets less in your face, and you start to feel like you're in nature. After a short climb you reach some cow meadows, and a herd of bullocks looked at me curiously. One of them looked like it wanted to fight me, but the barbed wire fence stopped him charging. I wandered around on the hill for 45 minutes, taking in the view of the fjord, with its snowy mountain tops in the distance. I booked an overnight stay in the valley to see more of it, and I walked up past the railway and some railway cottages up the valley to where I was staying. Across on the other side of the river, the train passed by fully loaded, and I walked up the riverside about 2 kilometres to the youth hostel where I booked a room. Around me were huge cliffs with waterfalls coming down them, and small villages that were off the tourist trail. The youth hostel was the cheapest option in the valley and was very simple. Just a tiny single room with a bed, and very warm when I entered. There was a kitchen, but I'd hardly brought any food, and there was nowhere to buy any food near the hostel. I just had a muller rice pudding for my tea and a drink. There was no breakfast either. At 5 AM people got up to make the most of the day and headed off. By 8 AM the hostel was quiet, and I chilled out there for another hour. Then I went for a walk up the valley. Nearby is the Fossen waterfall, and if you want you can climb up the side of it. The path is steep and the hike is around 5 kilometres in total. You're promised good views of the valley from high up. I hung out near the river though, and took some photos of it, making its way down the valley. Away from the centre, the houses were peaceful in gorgeous surroundings. It would make a great place to live if you didn't mind the tourists in the village centre. As I hadn't got anything for breakfast, I headed back down there to get something to eat. I was leaving the village later in the day by boat, and I hung around the fjord taking in the views. A swimming spot looked idyllic, but no one was swimming, maybe in summer. I watched the boats coming and going and tried to figure out what type of boat I was getting. Certainly not a rib boat, or I hope not a packed out tourist boat. Flåm had been great to revisit and spend some more time there. Not just getting a train down, then another straight back up. It's a pretty gorgeous place away from the tourist hub, and by walking 500 metres away from this, you can start to experience its beauty. I was very glad I'd made it back, and in the next video I will go out into Sonny Fjord and see the fjords from the water. Thanks for watching.